This paranormal story happened to my wife and me in 2009. Everything took place in a budget hotel in Europe. My name is Carlos Andres, and my wife's name is Christina. That year, my wife and I had been married for a few months, and we decided to go to Europe for our honeymoon for 2 weeks in winter. The entire trip was amazing, but when we went to the airport to catch our flight back to Mexico, we were told that the flights had been canceled because a snowstorm was coming, and it was likely that our flight would be delayed until after the storm passed, which would be approximately 2 days. We didn't know what to do since we didn't have much money left, just enough for those 2 weeks we had planned to stay there. So, we had to look for a very economical hotel. Eventually, we found one very close to the city center. Yes, it looked very rundown, but above all, it looked very old. It was a very ancient colonial hotel, but it was the best we could afford. We rented a room for those 2 nights, went up to the 3rd floor where our room was and settled in. From the moment we entered, my wife told me she didn't feel well, that her mood had suddenly changed, and she felt very strange, like an inexplicable anxiety. I told her we could go out for a while to distract ourselves and not spend too much time in that place since, honestly, it wasn't as nice as the hotels we had stayed in during the previous days. I thought that was the reason my wife felt so anxious, or, as she said, how she felt. But she didn't want to go out because it was too cold, and she said she wasn't in the mood to do anything. We spent the entire day in the room watching TV and resting since we were quite tired from the whole trip. My wife fell asleep around 8 p.m. Meanwhile, I decided to leave the hotel to find an open cafe to buy some food and coffee for both of us, as obviously, that hotel didn't sell food, let alone have a restaurant. I decided not to wake my wife and left without telling her, which I now know was a mistake on my part. Even so, it didn't take me long to find a cafe since there were many on every corner. I went into the first one I saw and bought some sandwiches and coffee to go. I didn't take long, maybe about 20 minutes. But when I entered the room, my wife was extremely scared and had an inexplicable terror on her face. Her fright was so much that she screamed loudly, scaring me as well. She jumped out of bed and threw off all the blankets, desperately searching for something with her eyes full of fear. I asked her, alarmed, what was happening, and she responded with a terrified face, almost in tears. There was something here on the bed with me. It was lying next to me, caressing my arm, and moving. I was half asleep and didn't say anything because I thought it was you. I was so confused. I looked under the bed to see if there was anyone, even though I knew no one could have entered the room since, obviously, I had locked it before leaving. But there was no one else in the room, not even in the bathroom. In my confusion, I asked my wife if she was dreaming, that maybe she could have confused her dreams with reality and got scared when she saw me suddenly enter. I wanted to find an explanation and calm her down, above all. But she kept telling me over and over that it wasn't a dream, that it really happened. And when she saw me entering through the door, she felt an overwhelming fear, which is why she jumped out of bed and reacted like that. I didn't know what else to say or do. Of course, I believed her because she is my wife and I trust her. She had never lied about things like that. In fact, she had never believed in those things, nor did she like watching horror movies, nor was she a fan of any of that. She had no reason to lie, and besides, I could see the fear on her face. I know her perfectly well. I asked if she wanted us to move to another hotel, but she calmed down and said no, that she was feeling better and that I shouldn't worry. Besides, we didn't have money to pay for another hotel since we had spent the rest on that hotel for 2 nights. We both had dinner, but honestly, the food didn't taste like anything because of that bitter moment we had gone through. I felt terrible seeing my wife so uncomfortable. She wasn't herself at that moment. She looked very strange, and I could see she didn't feel well. We finished dinner, and she told me we should go to sleep because she didn't want to stay awake any longer. We fell into a deep sleep, but in the early morning, I felt my wife moving me to wake me up. She only moved me without saying anything. I asked her what was happening, and she responded in a whisper, "Look, in front, where the armchair is, And here's where the most disturbing and terrifying part of this story comes in. There was an armchair in the room in front of the bed, in the corner of the room, and sitting there was a very old woman with a very unsettling appearance watching us sleep. "Do you see her?" my wife asked me in a very low voice while trembling. I responded that I did. We both held each other's hands very tightly. I felt my wife trembling in an overwhelming way. I wanted to get out of bed to turn on the light and see who that woman was. But my wife pulled me back to prevent me from getting up because she was afraid something might happen to me. Those were the longest minutes of our lives. Imagine being in that situation, lying in bed, seeing an old woman with a horrible appearance sitting in front of you in the shadows, watching you sleep, while the atmosphere becomes increasingly tense and desperate. I didn't know what else to do but fear for my wife, as I knew what we were seeing wasn't a person from this plane. Very slowly, I covered my wife's face with the sheet, and then I covered mine too. By this point, she was already crying, but without making a sound. I decided to uncover my face and saw that the old woman was no longer in the armchair. That's when I jumped out of bed and turned on the light. I told my wife that there was no one there anymore. Hearing this, she uncovered her face and began to cry uncontrollably. I just hugged her and told her to pack our things, that we were leaving for another hotel, no matter that we had paid for 2 nights there. She immediately started packing without hesitating for a second and without stopping crying. I swear that seeing that left us in a state of nervous shock for a long time. We went down to the reception and told the young man there at that moment what had happened, hoping we could somehow get our money back for the next night, which in the end we couldn't. But he apologized and was very empathetic with us, telling us himself that it was better for us to leave for another hotel because many paranormal things happened in that place, which is why guests didn't stay long at the hotel. I couldn't help but ask him why, but with the little English he spoke, he only told us that in the 1940s, that place was a complex of apartments, and many Jews lived there, most of whom were deprived of their lives in that place in their own apartments, obviously by the Germans. That was too much for me and my wife. We immediately left the place, and she told me it was like taking a breath of fresh air the moment we stepped out. Her anxiety disappeared completely when she set foot on the street. In reality, what happened to her, and what had her so anxious, was entering that place, where, as we found out, very atrocious and inhumane things had happened in the past. It's obvious it has that vibe, and many people, just by stepping into that place, feel very bad immediately. We don't know if that woman who appeared to us while we were sleeping was a Jewish woman whom the Germans unfortunately took the life of while she was in her apartment, although that's most likely the case. We truly do not wish anyone to live through an experience of this level. I can't even understand how we didn't have a heart attack seeing this presence. Always thoroughly investigate the places where you will stay, especially their past. Sometimes what is cheap can end up being very costly. Hello community. My name is Maria and I'm writing to you from Colorado. I want to share this story that happened to me and my boyfriend. While we were on vacation staying at a hotel in Florida, my boyfriend got time off from work in October. So, we decided to go to the beach because it was already quite cold where we live. I was looking for affordable yet nice hotels. Obviously, we didn't stay in any that were right on the beach because those were too expensive. In my search, I found a small hotel that looked really nice and even had a pool. The hotel wasn't on the beach, but it was just a few blocks away, so I thought it was a great option, especially for the price. We arrived that morning to check in and everything was fine. The hotel looked just like in the photos, very clean and comfortable. However, what I didn't like at first was that our room was on the first floor, meaning the ground floor, and our window faced the pool. My concern was that we wouldn't be able to rest because of the noise from outside, but later I read that the pool closed at 7 p.m. After that time, No one could be outside by the pool. We settled in and then went to the beach for the rest of the day until evening when we returned to our room. I don't remember the exact time, but it was past 11 p.m. because we had stayed out late at a bar having some drinks. The window curtains were open, and the first thing I noticed when I looked out was an elderly man lying on one of those beach chairs with a book covering his face. The man was there alone, reading, which seemed strange to me because according to the rules, the pool doors closed at 7 p.m. But without giving it much thought, I closed the curtains and we went to sleep because we were both very tired. The next day, we spent the morning by the pool with other hotel guests. After that, we went to the beach and then to a shopping center. We returned to the hotel around 7:30 p.m. My boyfriend asked if I wanted to go out for dinner or if I preferred to order something to the room. Since I was really tired, I said it would be better to stay in. While we were waiting for the food, I looked out the window again and saw that same elderly man lying in the same chair, reading the same book with his face covered. I mentioned to my boyfriend how strange it was that someone was by the pool at that hour because, according to the hotel rules, that was prohibited. Even the receptionist had told us that the pool doors closed at 7 p.m. sharp. He suggested I ask the person bringing our food if it was possible to go to the pool at that hour. Not because we wanted to gossip or report the man outside, but because my boyfriend wanted to swim, and we assumed the hotel staff knew about this person by the pool since they checked the area before closing the doors. When the food arrived, I asked the young man if we could go to the pool for a bit. He replied that the pool area was indeed supposed to be closed and no one should be out there. I mentioned the elderly man reading in one of the chairs, the same man we had seen there very late the previous night. The young man asked if he could look out the window to see for himself, because he personally made sure every night that no one was outside before closing the pool, including that night. We gave him permission to look out the window, but the man was no longer there. The young man asked if we were sure we had seen someone there because no one could enter after the doors were locked with a security code which only hotel employees had. We assured him that we had seen the man. The young man said he would check the security cameras and notify the reception. After that, we decided to close the curtains to enjoy our dinner because the situation had left us quite uneasy, knowing the employees were unaware of the man outside. The next day, we spent the whole day out and returned around 9 p.m. We ran into the same young man who had brought us dinner the previous night. We greeted him, and my boyfriend asked what had happened with the elderly man at the pool. The young man made a worried face and told us that his colleagues had told him what had happened because he had only been working there for a short time. According to them, the elderly man was the hotel's former owner who had died there because he lived in the hotel. They told him that one night some men broke into his room and shot him in the face because he owed them a lot of money, and it wasn't a secret that he was involved in shady businesses. My boyfriend laughed when he heard this and asked the employee, half jokingly, if they were saying the man was a ghost. The young man didn't laugh and very seriously confirmed that yes, and we weren't the only guests who had seen him by the pool. In life, that was his favorite place to be. He advised us not to open the curtains and apologized on behalf of the hotel. Completely stunned, my boyfriend and I returned to our room, although he couldn't believe it and kept saying it was just a lie the employees were telling us, an urban legend or something like that. But I felt genuinely scared and followed the young man's advice not to open the curtains. The truth is, I was now afraid to look out and see that man. We went to sleep, and around 4 a.m. I got up to use the bathroom, but I heard a strange noise like someone was tapping on the window. Realizing the noise was coming from outside, I got very scared and woke up my boyfriend. He also heard the tapping on the window and, very angry, got up from bed and opened the curtains to look out. There, just a few inches from our window, was that same man, but this time we could see his face, and it was horribly disfigured. My boyfriend dropped the curtain, screaming loudly just like I did. We ran out of the room, and the hotel employees heard us and came to ask what had happened. My boyfriend, very angry, told them what we had seen outside our room. The employees didn't know how to react and just kept apologizing to us, but I knew it wasn't their fault. So I tried to calm my boyfriend down so we could re-enter the room, pack our things, and move to another hotel. I don't know how I managed to stay calm because seeing that man in such a condition was the worst trauma I have ever experienced. I don't want to describe it further out of respect for his memory, but it was truly horrifying, especially knowing that the man was no longer alive. We returned home more traumatized than relaxed. When we told our friends and family this story, many of them didn't believe us. I know it's hard to believe because if it hadn't happened to me and someone else told me, I might not believe it either. It's something that, until it happens to you, if you're a skeptic, you might not believe. But it did happen to me, and I know these things happen more often than we think in hotels, especially old ones. If you think about it, they have so much history, so many people passing through, leaving their energy, whether good or bad. And now imagine if a crime happened in that hotel in the past. All those events remain there, reliving those terrible moments. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rafa. I want to share with all of you this story that happened a few years ago. It occurred in a Caribbean hotel while I was staying there with my wife, enjoying our summer vacation. Our children gifted us the trip, and we went intending to have a good time, enjoy ourselves, and forget about our daily problems. Unfortunately, that fun was completely interrupted by what I am about to tell you. First of all, I should mention that the hotel was divided into several rows, meaning that in front of us was a building with rooms from the same hotel. This was our view from the balcony and the large window of our room. That afternoon we arrived and settled into the place, which was very beautiful and pleasant. We were staying on the 12th floor. We took a short nap as we were very tired from the trip. Afterward, my wife went to take a shower so we could go down to dinner at the hotel's elegant restaurant with an ocean view. Meanwhile, I decided to go out onto the balcony. Although it didn't have an ocean view, I liked being there, feeling the breeze. I sat in one of the chairs outside and just relaxed, looking at the surroundings. But suddenly something caught my attention. There was a girl in front of me on the balcony of the room directly across from us. What caught my attention was that the girl was staring at me very intently. She stood in the middle of the balcony with her room behind her in darkness. This young woman wore a nightgown that reached her ankles, and I couldn't see her face very well because of the distance, but I could tell she had no expression on her face. The girl kept looking at me to the point that I felt very uncomfortable. I tried to be polite and just raised my hand to greet her, then turned my gaze elsewhere as I received no greeting in return. My wife finished her shower and then I went to shower while she was doing her makeup and getting ready. When I came out of the bathroom, I told her what had happened with that young woman, asking if she had seen her, but my wife replied that she hadn't. In fact, she had gone out to the balcony to take photos and send them to our children, but she didn't see anyone across the way. Without giving it much more thought, we went down to dinner and had a good time at the restaurant. We returned to our room around midnight. My wife was so tired that she went straight to bed to sleep. Since I had had a few drinks, I couldn't fall asleep. So I decided to go out onto the balcony again to help me get sleepy. The first thing I did was check that balcony to see if the girl was there, but there was no one. So I relaxed. Suddenly she was there again, standing and observing me. I never understood how she had appeared on the balcony in a second because I had just looked, and there was absolutely no one there. What caught my attention the most was that the room was always dark, unlike the other rooms. Maybe 2 minutes passed, and noticing that the girl was still staring at me without looking away, I decided to go back inside the room and close the curtains. I fell asleep and didn't wake up until the next day. I opened the curtains, and the first thing I did was check that balcony, which was empty again. My wife and I got ready and spent the whole day out on a tour, returning to the hotel around 10:30 p.m. Once again, my wife went to shower to go to bed. To be honest, I thought twice before going out onto the balcony, fearing that strange and somewhat disturbing girl might be there again, watching me. So I found something to watch on TV and stayed in bed watching a movie while my wife finished her shower. After that, I showered and went to bed around 11:40 p.m. I woke up abruptly at 2 a.m. I tried to fall back asleep, but found it impossible. I had to get up early the next day as a tour company was picking us up early for another excursion. So I got up and made myself some of the tea my wife drinks to help me sleep. Since I couldn't turn on the light to avoid waking her, I had to open the window again and decided to go out onto the balcony to drink my tea. I truly wish I had never done that. I sat in that chair again, and the first thing I did was look toward that balcony to ensure that the girl wasn't there. And no, she wasn't. I started drinking my tea, waiting for it to take effect. Suddenly she appeared again. This time, for the first time, I saw her move. She was walking toward the balcony with very slow steps. Suddenly, I saw her lean on the balcony railing, placing both hands on it. Then she started to lean forward little by little until she jumped. I couldn't even scream. I was completely petrified and horrified watching her. My hands started trembling so much that I dropped the cup. My wife woke up and asked me what I was doing on the balcony if I wasn't going to sleep. I don't know how long it took me to react and respond. "The girl jumped," I told my wife twice with a trembling voice. She asked me, concerned, "What girl?" as she walked toward me. I reacted, stood up, and told her we needed to call the reception while I told her what I had just seen. My wife couldn't believe it. We called the reception, but they only told me not to worry, that they would take care of it, and wished me a good night before hanging up. I told my wife in astonishment that I couldn't believe what they were saying, as I was truly surprised by how the receptionist responded, as if it were nothing serious. Clearly, I couldn't sleep after what had happened. I expected to see police sirens or ambulances arriving at the hotel, but an entire hour passed and the hotel remained completely calm. I couldn't take it anymore, and told my wife that I was going down to see what had happened, and she decided to accompany me. But when we arrived at reception, everyone was acting as if nothing had happened. Even the bellhops were laughing, watching a video on their phones. I approached the receptionist to ask what had happened with the girl I reported, and the young woman didn't know how to respond. So her colleague next to her answered me saying, "Sir, everything is fine. No one jumped from any floor. We checked just for safety, but honestly, this happens very often. Guests staying in this part of the hotel frequently report seeing a girl jumping from the balcony across the way, but we never find anything." I couldn't believe what he was telling me. I even got upset, accusing them of trying to fool us, thinking they wanted to hide that an accident had occurred to preserve the hotel's reputation. But they very kindly tried to calm me down. That's when the receptionist spoke up. "What you saw happened a few years ago. A young Asian woman who was traveling alone stayed in that room, and one early morning she jumped, losing her life instantly. If you want, you can confirm what I'm saying on the internet." And after that, the reports started coming in from people like you who saw the young woman jumping. My wife ran outside and then came back in, telling me that she hadn't seen anything on the ground, asking if I was sure of what I saw. I told her yes, and the receptionist showed me on her computer that no one was staying in that room that night, and in fact, no one had stayed there for a long time. My wife and I were there listening, trying to understand or at least believe what we were hearing. We went back to our room, and of course we couldn't sleep the entire night. We never opened those curtains again during our stay. We stayed there for 3 days, enduring it because we didn't want to worry our children, especially knowing the effort they had made to pay for that trip. But nothing was the same after that night. We no longer enjoyed our vacation the same way, and I was still traumatized by seeing that girl jump, especially knowing that she wasn't even real. Or maybe she was. Years later, we decided to share this story with our children, who also couldn't believe it, and to this day, we still can't believe we experienced that. But it happened, and that has been the only time I've seen what could be called a ghost. I hope it never happens again, Thank you for listening to these stories. I hope you enjoyed them. Much more content is on the way. Subscribe and activate the little bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. Have a great evening, everyone. See you next time.